Today I'm going to tell you about a time traveler who, back in 2018, predicted that 3i Atlas would collide with Earth. In the old Reddit threads and Ask Me Anything, there is a topic from a user called 2072 Time.
I am an American time traveler from 2072. Ask me anything.
In those days, 7 years ago, almost nobody noticed him. A few hundred comments, the usual jokes about,
"Where is my hoverboard?"
and the thread just sank. Today, opening it again is enough to give anyone goosebumps. 2 years before the coronavirus, the author wrote,
The scariest event in the coming years will be a pandemic of a respiratory virus. The virus appears in China at the end of 2019, and in March 2020, the world shuts down. There will be lockdowns, masks, remote work, and school, QR codes, endless arguments about vaccines. By August, more than 1 million people will be dead.
At the time of that post, there was no word COVID-19 yet, none of the terms we are used to now. But the description is eerily close to what actually happened. The commenters just laugh.
Yeah, sure, a new flu is going to wipe us out. You've been watching too many movies.
And right there he adds something that in 2018 absolutely nobody cared about.
The main plot twist is the period from 2025 to 2026, when a new interstellar object enters the solar system. Officially, they'll say it's safe and will pass just inside Mars's orbit. Don't believe it. In our timeline, its orbit changed significantly.
What interstellar object was this time traveler talking about? This year, the strangest and most puzzling space object is, of course, 3i Atlas, which is about to make its closest approach to Earth. And indeed, scientists calmly repeat the same thing.
There's no threat. It's a unique but safe visitor from interstellar space.
NASA's official data sound reassuring. The minimum distance to Earth is almost twice the distance from Earth to the Sun, so there is supposedly no danger. But in the comments, the author writes the following.
In your models, you're ignoring an effect we call the anchor core. A small, ultra-dense fragment inside the comet responds to Jupiter's gravity and its own gas jets. In the spring of 2026, as it flies past Jupiter, the comet gets a microscopic but critical change in velocity. After that, the trajectory changes dramatically.
In 2018, it looks like the ravings of a madman, especially since nobody had heard of 3i Atlas at all. But years later, when the object really was discovered and articles start appearing about its strange behavior and trajectory anomalies, the words of this anonymous time traveler begin to sound very different. Then it gets more interesting. The time traveler writes,
In my reality, the impact happens in July 2026 over the southern part of the Pacific Ocean. The comet doesn't reach the surface in one solid piece. It breaks into several nuclei. But the energy is still enough to throw so much water and dust into the atmosphere that the climate changes for decades.
But the commenters just keep joking. Some demand lottery numbers, others ask,
Will Elon Musk survive? Does the internet still exist?
So how can we sum up this information from an anonymous time traveler? First, he really did predict the pandemic 2 years before it began. That makes it harder to be completely dismissive of him. Second, he never gave the comet's name, which is pretty strange. Because if 3i Atlas really had slammed into Earth and changed the climate for decades, every person on the planet would know that name. 3i Atlas. And that is exactly what makes you doubt his story, even though the match in dates is very intriguing. We will see. Whether this time traveler's words stand the test of time is something we are going to find out very soon. The Simpsons have done it again. These creepy predictions for 2026 will give you chills. One of the strangest predictions tied to The Simpsons is about the next World Cup. Fans claim the show once hinted at a Mexico versus Portugal final, and now that pairing suddenly feels possible. The tournament will expand to 48 teams and be held across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Matches will fill giant stadiums like MetLife in New Jersey and the legendary Azteca in Mexico City. With Cristiano Ronaldo's legacy still casting a shadow over Portugal and Mexico's national team riding a new wave of talent, the idea of these two nations colliding in the last match doesn't sound like fantasy anymore. Analysts already note that both squads are positioned in ways that could make a deep run likely. The prediction seems to hang over the championship like a storm cloud, adding an eerie tension to the hype. Think about how many times fans joked about Simpsons episodes before only to see parts of them unfold years later, from Donald Trump's presidency to Disney's buyout of Fox. If this football final game actually happens, it will once again fuel theories that Springfield writers are tapped into some strange foresight. Whether it's probability, coincidence, or hidden insight, the Mexico-Portugal prediction is becoming a real talking point. Supporters from Lisbon to Guadalajara whisper that destiny itself might be following a script. This World Cup will not only be remembered as the biggest ever, but possibly as another moment when fiction and reality blur in the creepiest way. The Simpsons once aired an episode where Lisa fought against a system that used algorithms to decide children's careers. It was satire, of course, but today that idea doesn't feel funny anymore. Artificial intelligence is advancing so fast that even leading tech companies admit they can't fully control the consequences. By 2026, millions of people could see their daily work changed, or even erased by machines making decisions for them. From customer service lines to legal advice and medical analysis, jobs once thought safe are now being questioned. The scariest part is not just the replacement of human effort, but the possibility of algorithms shaping who gets hired, who gets promoted, and even which voices are amplified online. Analysts warn that by the time the World Cup final is played, the job market might look completely different from what it was only a few years earlier. Workers are being retrained in a rush, while some governments are already testing ideas like universal basic income to offset the shift. Fans of The Simpsons can't help but recall that moment when the cartoon seemed to point toward a future where computers quietly take charge of society's direction. It may sound like a plot from Black Mirror, but it is increasingly reflected in boardrooms, classrooms, and even political debates. If predictions hold, 2026 could be the year when humanity finally realizes that its new digital colleagues aren't assistants anymore, but decision-makers standing over our shoulders. The Simpsons have always loved to joke about outer space, but many of those jokes are starting to feel like chilling forecasts. One of the most famous storylines showed Springfield threatened by a huge comet streaking straight for the town. At the time, it was nothing more than a parody of old disaster films. Yet today, scientists are seriously preparing for that exact scenario. An asteroid was already nudged off its course by a spacecraft a few years ago, and in 2026, researchers will be visiting the same asteroid pair to study the impact. The mission sounds almost like a direct continuation of that Simpsons episode where an ordinary town stared helplessly at a rock in the sky. Add to this another eerie layer, an interstellar comet known as 3I/Atlas will be in range. It isn't just an icy ball. It comes from far beyond our solar system, carrying materials that could predate Earth itself. In Springfield, bizarre creatures like the three-eyed fish symbolized humanity's careless mistakes. In reality, 2026 may show us strange new elements of life hidden in cosmic debris. A powerful new ultraviolet space telescope is also set to launch, with the ability to catch explosive star deaths and cosmic flashes in real time. That means, for the first time, we could see sudden bursts in the sky that look like something right out of a Simpsons doomsday gag. At the same time, missions to the moon's south pole will be searching for frozen water, and new private space stations will be orbiting Earth. All of this is happening under the watchful eyes of projects that now officially track unexplained aerial phenomena. When The Simpsons made jokes about comets, alien invasions, and mutant creatures, no one thought it would ever feel so close to reality. Yet as 2026 approaches, those colorful stories seem less like gags and more like uncomfortable reflections of where we actually might be headed. Fans have been buzzing about a Simpsons scene that seems to predict 2026 politics with uncanny accuracy. In it, Donald Trump faces Homer in front of the White House, both pointing weapons while their teams argue behind them. Many believe it symbolizes not just a personal standoff, but a bigger clash in America's future citizens divided, leadership questioned, and the cycle of unrest repeating itself. The Simpsons once predicted Trump's rise, and now this frame is seen as the next circuit in that prophecy, hinting that 2026 could bring the most chaotic showdown yet. Few things feel creepier in hindsight than how The Simpsons once joked about global illness long before it became a reality. In the 1990s episode known as the Osaka flu, Springfield was thrown into panic when a virus spread from overseas packages. It was silly at the time, yet decades later people pointed at that cartoon and shuddered at how close it felt to real headlines. But the show didn't stop there. Another episode featured tainted meat leading to a kind of zombie outbreak in town with infected residents staggering through the streets. It was absurd slapstick in animated form, but when viewed today it feels strangely prophetic. Scientists warn that future pandemics may not arrive in the same way the world has just experienced, but could just as easily come from unexpected places, mutations spreading through livestock, resistant bacteria in food, or even pathogens thawing from melting ice. The Simpsons, with their strange meat jokes and flu episodes, almost seem to have tapped into that collective anxiety long before anyone gave it serious thought. In 2026, health experts are already discussing how to prepare for unusual outbreaks, ranging from avian strains that jump species to mysterious infections traced back to frozen permafrost. Of course, Springfield played it all for laughs, but the echoes today are eerie. Watching Homer stumble around like a cartoon zombie after eating a bad sandwich suddenly feels less like a parody and more like an exaggerated preview of how fragile modern health systems can be. The writers never meant to predict global crises, yet their exaggerated scenarios continue to line up uncomfortably with what the world faces. If another wave of illness or strange foodborne scare does unfold in 2026, The Simpsons' shadow will once again hover over the conversation, reminding people of how often fiction seems to nudge at the edges of reality. The Simpsons have always sprinkled food gags into their storylines, but some of those jokes now feel disturbingly sharp. In one episode, Homer hoards questionable canned goods in his basement, preparing for shortages that seemed like a far-off joke in the 1990s. Another storyline featured the town panicking when supply chains collapsed over something as trivial as a strike. Fast forward to today, and food security has become one of the biggest talking points among experts. Crop failures caused by heat waves, storms, and shifting weather are already pushing prices up, and 2026 could turn out to be the year when the world really feels it. Shipping analysts warn that oversupply of cargo ships followed by sudden choke points could cause wild swings in availability, leaving some regions oversaturated while others run dry. Add in the growing reliance on a handful of breadbasket nations, and The Simpsons' overstuffed basement suddenly looks less like comedy and more like survival strategy. Even the three-eyed fish joke connects, because many scientists are now pointing to pollution and mutations in our food supply as hidden threats. In Springfield, those problems were always solved with a laugh and a quick reset by the next episode. In reality, governments are already setting up emergency grain reserves and debating how to ration water for agriculture. Analysts whisper that a food shock could ignite social unrest faster than almost any other crisis. So when The Simpsons showed shelves stripped bare and neighbors fighting over basic goods, it felt like parody. But standing in today's fragile food economy, those cartoons look eerily close to the worries experts are voicing for 2026. If shelves really do empty or crops fail in multiple regions at once, many will recall the odd truth buried inside a cartoon town's panic scenes. The Simpsons may have given us plenty to think about, yet they're only part of the story. Now it's time to look at other strange and fascinating predictions pointing toward 2026. Climate scientists warn that 2026 is not just another year on the calendar, but part of a critical window in which global heating may reach frightening new heights. The likelihood of setting yet another global temperature record is extremely high, with many models pointing toward an average that edges closer to the symbolic 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold above pre-industrial levels. If this happens, the world will enter what some researchers call a red zone year, where the intensity of heat waves, droughts, and extreme storms climbs well beyond what most countries are prepared to handle. Across North America, power grids may be strained as millions of homes crank up air conditioning at the same time, while Europe faces rising risks of river levels falling so low that major trade routes become unusable. In Asia, monsoon patterns are shifting in ways that threaten harvests, and parts of Africa may see prolonged dry seasons that disrupt food production. Coastal regions around the world are also bracing for higher sea surges as warmer waters feed stronger storms. To counter these looming risks, cities are rushing to expand green spaces, experiment with reflective building materials, and create shaded, cool corridors where residents can find relief during the worst days. Yet many experts argue that adaptation is moving too slowly compared to the pace of change. If 2026 does break the expected records, it will not only underline how serious the climate crisis has become, but also mark a turning point where adaptation is no longer optional, it becomes a matter of survival. By 2026, the boundary between human thought and machine response may become thinner than ever before. Brain-computer interface technology, once dismissed as science fiction, is moving rapidly into clinical and commercial testing. The goal is no longer just to help paralyzed patients move a cursor on a screen, but to create direct, real-time communication between the brain and external devices. Several companies have already demonstrated patients typing messages or controlling robotic arms purely with thought, and 2026 could mark the year this technology becomes widely available for therapeutic use. Trials are expanding across hospitals where people with severe injuries or neurological conditions are regaining a level of independence once thought impossible. Yet the creepier side of this breakthrough is the prospect of healthy individuals adopting implants to gain an edge instant language translation, memory enhancement, or faster learning. The line between medical tool and lifestyle upgrade may blur quickly. Experts are already warning of an interface divide, where wealthy users could pay for advanced implants while others remain fully human in the traditional sense. Questions of security also loom large if your thoughts can control devices. Who ensures those signals cannot be intercepted or manipulated? In popular culture, we've seen countless visions of cybernetic futures, from The Matrix to Ghost in the Shell. But in 2026, we may finally take the first steps into a reality where those imagined worlds don't feel so distant anymore. What started as a medical moonshot could soon redefine what it means to be human. Factories in 2026 will look nothing like the industrial floors of the past century. The roar of heavy machinery and long assembly lines is giving way to silent robots, digital replicas, and printers that can create complex components on demand. Industrial analysts say this transformation is accelerating so quickly that traditional supply chains may shrink, replaced by localized high-tech hubs capable of producing almost anything. Robots are no longer limited to repetitive welding or packaging jobs. Equipped with advanced sensors and artificial intelligence, they now self-diagnose, reroute around bottlenecks, and collaborate with humans in real time. Alongside them, 3D printing has matured from prototyping to mass production, with aerospace companies, automakers, and even hospitals printing high-performance parts and implants that once took months to machine. The digital twin concept adds another layer. Every piece of equipment and every process has a virtual clone that can be stress-tested, repaired, or redesigned before any real material is touched. By 2026, entire production lines may exist first in the cloud, running simulations to find the most efficient path before a single screw is turned. This level of precision could slash costs, reduce waste, and allow smaller firms to compete with industrial giants. Yet the shift is unsettling too. Millions of traditional factory jobs could vanish, replaced by high-skill programming and robotics oversight. And if one cyber attack can cripple a digital twin system, the potential ripple effects are enormous. The world is on the edge of an industrial revolution where robots, printers, and algorithms aren't just helping humans work faster, they're taking control of how the modern economy builds itself. For years, 6G was little more than a buzzword, something tossed around in labs and conferences as the distant successor to 5G. By 2026, that whisper is expected to grow into a roar as the first working prototypes begin to surface outside research facilities. Engineers are testing terahertz frequencies capable of transmitting data dozens of times faster than 5G, opening doors to real-time holographic communication, ultra-precise industrial automation, and immersive extended reality environments that blur the lines between digital and physical. Early demonstrations may include streaming concerts where every audience member, even those across the globe, experiences the same stage presence in augmented reality, or doctors performing remote surgeries with virtually no delay. Governments and telecom giants are racing to secure patents and standards, knowing that whoever leads in 6G will hold enormous strategic power. Military planners are also watching closely, as such networks could allow swarms of autonomous drones or satellites to coordinate instantly. Yet challenges remain. Steep terahertz waves don't travel far and are easily disrupted by walls, rain, and even human bodies. That means building 6G networks will require an unprecedented density of antennas, satellites, and microcells. Security experts are already voicing concerns, since faster data also means faster attacks if safeguards fail. Still, the momentum is unstoppable. By the time the decade closes, the world may look back at 2026 as the year when 6G leapt from science fiction slides into tangible reality, laying the foundation for a communication era that feels less like an upgrade and more like a reinvention of connectivity itself. So, 2026 is shaping up to be a landmark year in space, honestly. One that feels closer to a science fiction blockbuster than, a quiet calendar of launches. For the first time, commercial space stations are expected to begin real operations in orbit, breaking the monopoly long held by governments. Private companies are building these modular habitats where research, tourism, and even media projects could unfold, turning low Earth orbit into a marketplace rather than just an exclusive science zone. At the same time, China is preparing to launch its Chang'e 7 mission to the Moon's South Pole, a region filled with mystery and enormous potential. Frozen water hidden in the deep craters could someday fuel rockets or support permanent bases. And this mission will send not just a lander and rover, but even a small flying probe to map the terrain from the air. While these robotic pioneers work, NASA is pushing ahead with Artemis II, the first crewed flight of the Orion spacecraft around the Moon. A team of astronauts will orbit our nearest neighbor and return, rehearsing for future landings. Alongside them, Europe's Hera probe will arrive at the Didymos asteroid system, investigating humanity's first attempt at deflecting a space rock. All of these missions overlap to create a picture of 2026 as the year when, well, humanity truly spreads its wings beyond Earth. The competition is fierce, the goals are ambitious, and the stakes could not be higher. If water is confirmed in accessible form, if commercial stations prove functional, and if crewed lunar flights succeed, the path to permanent off-world living will suddenly feel very real. The coming year may be remembered as the moment space stopped being a distant frontier and became a stage for everyday life. For decades, artificial intelligence has been treated as a tool, something to help analyze data, suggest patterns, or speed up calculations. But by 2026, that role could shift in a way that honestly redefines discovery itself. Researchers are training advanced AI systems not just to process information, but to generate entirely new scientific hypotheses. Imagine algorithms proposing chemical formulas that no human chemist ever considered, or designing materials with properties we didn't know could exist. Already, machine learning has produced promising antibiotics and optimized complex battery designs. The next step is giving these models more freedom to explore vast problem spaces at a speed humans just, cannot match. Critics warn of black box science, where breakthroughs may appear without full understanding of how they work. Yet optimism is high that AI-driven insights could accelerate solutions to pressing issues like climate change, clean energy, or quantum computing. If 2026 delivers even one high-profile case where AI proposes an experiment that proves successful in the real world, it will mark a new era in research. The unsettling twist is the shift in authorship. Nobel-worthy ideas might not belong to a human mind anymore, but to a neural network. It raises profound questions about credit, trust, and control. Who owns an invention created by a machine? And how do we regulate discoveries that even their designers don't fully understand? 2026 could be the moment when humanity is forced to accept that the next Einstein might not be a person at all, but a circuit board humming quietly in a lab. Anti-aging medical science has been pushing against the limits of aging and disease for decades. But 2026 is set to be a year when theory finally translates into visible results. In labs across the world, researchers are working on therapies that repair organs, reverse certain cellular damage, and restore function to tissues once thought permanently lost. Regenerative medicine is advancing beyond experimental stages, with stem cell-based treatments showing dramatic results in early trials. Scientists in Israel have already grown lab kidneys that survived for months, and other groups are experimenting with ways to trigger cells near death to revive themselves and heal damaged tissue. Breakthroughs in anti-aging research are also reaching the stage where human trials may produce data strong enough to suggest real longevity benefits. The possibility of extending healthy lifespan, even by a few years, would reshape economies and societies overnight. While skeptics argue that the complexity of the human body resists simple fixes, optimism is growing that we are, honestly, on the verge of a new era of healthcare. The most unsettling prospect is how quickly such breakthroughs could split society between those who can afford enhanced longevity and those who cannot. A medicine that adds decades to life may exist, but will it be accessible? Just as earlier moonshots redefined space exploration, the medical moonshot of 2026 could redefine what it means to grow old. For the first time, the dream of slowing down the clock might not belong to science fiction anymore, but to hospitals and clinics around the world. For nearly 2 decades, the smartphone has ruled daily life, shaping how we talk, work, shop, and even navigate our streets. But by 2026, that dominance may finally start to crack. Tech giants are pouring resources into lightweight augmented reality glasses, wrist-based devices, and voice-driven assistants that make staring at a glowing rectangle feel, honestly, outdated. Early prototypes already let users see directions projected in front of their eyes, take hands-free calls, or translate foreign languages instantly. Younger generations raised on wearables and immersive media are quick to adopt these tools, and analysts predict that the cultural grip of smartphones will loosen fast once the alternatives become affordable. The shift won't happen overnight. Millions will still keep phones as backup devices. But the symbolism is striking. Just as DVDs vanished when streaming took over, the pocket phone could fade into the background as society embraces more seamless ways to stay connected. 2026 may be remembered as the first year when carrying a slab of glass and metal started to feel old-fashioned. Deep beneath the sands of Egypt, in one of the lesser-known tombs of the Valley of the Kings, a set of carvings had baffled researchers for over a century. Unlike the familiar hieroglyphs that line the grand walls of tombs like Tutankhamun's, these markings were jagged, disorganized, and partially burned into stone. Many dismissed them as decoration or, just damage from grave robbers. But that changed when an experimental artificial intelligence was fed high-resolution 3D scans of the tomb and asked to look for patterns. What it found has really shaken the field of archaeology. The AI, built by a private tech startup working alongside a team of Egyptologists, wasn't trained on Egyptian scripts alone. It had absorbed data from thousands of ancient languages and symbologies, including lesser-known African and Near Eastern scripts. The program detected that the unusual markings in the tomb matched no known writing system, but followed consistent linguistic structures, grammar, rhythm, and spacing that suggested deliberate encoded communication. Then came the breakthrough. The AI began cross-referencing the markings with ancient astronomical calendars, phonetic sound patterns, and religious texts stored in its databank. The carvings weren't just gibberish, they were instructions. Specifically, a set of rituals involving the stars Sirius and Orion, often tied to the rebirth mythologies in Egyptian lore. But it wasn't just religious. One part described a gate to the void that opens when Sirius reaches its highest point in the sky, something that happens once a year during the dog days of summer. It didn't describe this as metaphor. The tone was honestly alarmingly technical. Even terms that had been assumed to be mythological, like the eye of the sky and the door beneath the dust, were laid out as if they were mechanisms, not metaphors. The AI's translation described devices, levers, timed rotations, reflective surfaces, almost like someone thousands of years ago was trying to explain how to operate a piece of machinery using sacred language. Egyptologists are now calling it ritual engineering. Not magic, but instructions disguised as ceremony. The site is under tight protection now. No photos, no public access. But the AI's logs remain, and what they contain hints that this may be one of the oldest examples of an ancient culture preserving technical knowledge long after forgetting what it was originally used for. It's like if someone 5,000 years from now found a smartphone manual but had no idea what a phone was, only that the instructions mattered. This discovery has already prompted similar AI models to be tested on lesser-known Egyptian tombs. If even half of what's been decoded turns out to be valid, we may need to rethink what kind of knowledge ancient civilizations actually left behind, and why they buried it so deep. When Göbekli Tepe was uncovered in the dusty hills of southeastern Turkey, archaeologists knew they had found something that didn't fit the historical timeline. Massive stone pillars arranged in circles, decorated with bizarre animal figures and symbols, built by people who, as far as textbooks went, weren't supposed to have the tools or knowledge to build at this scale. For decades, the meaning behind the carvings remained just that, a mystery, until artificial intelligence got involved. A research group recently fed ultra-high-res scans of Göbekli Tepe's carvings into a multilingual AI model trained on ancient iconography, star patterns, and early language frameworks. The results sent chills through the team. The AI didn't just see animals, it saw a message. Using statistical pattern matching and archaeoastronomical data, the AI proposed that the animals weren't just symbolic. They were constellations: the vulture, linked to Sagittarius; the scorpion, obvious, Scorpius. But more importantly, the placement of the symbols on certain pillars corresponded to positions in the night sky around 10,950 BC. That date lines up eerily well with the onset of a mysterious global cooling event scientists called the Younger Dryas. The decoded message wasn't warm or spiritual, it was a record of catastrophe. According to the AI's interpretation, the carvings were warning of something that came from above, a cluster of objects, possibly from the torrid meteor stream that struck the planet. Not myth, not legend. A stone-carved sky map that says we saw something terrible and we want you to remember. Skeptics initially dismissed the theory as a stretch, but then infrared scans revealed buried carvings not visible to the naked eye. Symbols the AI had predicted would be there, based on patterns in other carvings. And they were, exactly where the machine said they'd be. If this interpretation holds, it means Göbekli Tepe isn't just a temple. It's a data archive, not of prayers, but of planetary trauma. A message passed down not in letters, but in stars and stone. A warning waiting 12,000 years for the right kind of intelligence, artificial as it turns out, to finally read it. What else could be hidden at other sites we thought were religious? What if ancient people were desperately trying to document something real, using the only language that could survive stone and symbol? Göbekli Tepe may be the first of many such records, if we're willing to let machines help us understand them. So the Greek island of Patmos is, mostly famous for the Book of Revelation, supposedly written in a cave by the Apostle John, at least if you go by tradition. Over time, the site turned into a huge pilgrimage destination, and, well, all kinds of religious symbols and inscriptions built up inside those stone walls. But here's where it gets interesting. Recent scans using multispectral imaging picked up something totally unexpected. Deep beneath layers of soot and candle smoke, there was something written in a language nobody recognized. Linguists who spent years trying to crack it. Some figured it was just really messed up Greek, others thought maybe it was a monk's personal shorthand. But then, one team tried a different approach. They fed the inscription into this experimental AI built to decode extinct scripts using pattern prediction and cross-linguistic modeling. The AI didn't get any hints or background, just the raw visual data. And what came out, honestly, shocked everyone involved. The script turned out to have weird similarities to a bunch of languages, bits of Aramaic, some early Latin, even stuff that looked like Phoenician numerals. But the wildest part? The AI found repeating patterns, especially around symbols next to certain calendar dates. These weren't names or hymns, they were warnings tied to astronomical cycles. The phrase that popped up the most after dozens of translations was this: "the dark returns when the mirror turns." The AI linked that to an old model of lunar-solar alignment where rare eclipses marked times of instability, social, geological, or even atmospheric. And yeah, it gets even weirder. Turns out one part of the cave wall had been covered by a wooden panel, which was only removed during a restoration in the mid-20th century. Behind it, there was this symbol carved deep, a circle with lines shooting out, looking a lot like modern diagrams of solar flares. Now, nobody's saying the ancient monks predicted coronal mass ejections, but the AI's analysis suggests they were tracking some kind of solar pattern and thought it was important enough to carve into their sacred space. They're calling this mysterious writing the Patmos cipher now, and it's still under analysis. But what's clear is that hidden behind all those famous stories of revelation and prophecy, there might be a much more practical, technical warning, one that sat unread for centuries until a machine finally made sense of it. In the ruins of Monte Albán, way up in the Oaxacan highlands, archaeologists found thousands of glyphs carved into stone tablets. These inscriptions, made by the ancient Zapotec civilization, have confused researchers for ages. Unlike Mayan glyphs, which for the most part we've figured out, these just didn't fit any expected patterns. They weren't really pictographic, but they weren't phonetic either. They looked like language, but just didn't behave like one. That's where AI stepped in. A university team used a custom model designed to spot deep patterns in extinct languages. They weren't after a word-for-word translation. They were looking for grammar, for structure, for logic, hidden under all that visual noise. And, well, they found it. The AI uncovered a linguistic pattern so unfamiliar that some researchers, half-jokingly, called it alien. The Zapotec glyphs didn't use a linear structure like we do. Sentences looped around. Verbs seemed to change not by tense, but by symmetry. And the most surprising thing? The meaning depended on where the symbol was on the tablet, not just what the symbol was. It's like reading a sentence where the top of the page means something totally different from the bottom. This kind of blew up the old idea that ancient languages always evolved towards something like what we use now. The AI showed that the Zapotec system worked more like mathematical code than spoken language. Instead of nouns and verbs, it tracked relationships, actions and reactions, states and transitions. Almost as if it was meant to be read by a system, not a person. So the new theory is that this wasn't a spoken language at all. It was a visual system for recording data, maybe agricultural cycles, maybe trade, maybe astronomical changes, encoded in a logic that was unique to its creators. The Zapotecs weren't just carving symbols. They were, in a sense, coding. Now, several carved stones are being re-examined with this in mind. And with AI's help, whole new layers of meaning are coming to light. The question isn't just, what does this glyph mean? Anymore. It's what kind of system made this in the first place? And honestly, it might be something unlike anything we've ever seen before, ancient or modern. When the Saqqara bird was first found in 1898, in an Egyptian tomb near Saqqara, people thought it was just a wooden toy. Shaped like a bird, with straight wings and no real feather details, most folks figured it was either ceremonial or, maybe just a kid's model. Some people went way out there and said it proved the Egyptians understood flight, but with no real evidence, the artifact kind of faded into the background. That is, until AI got involved. An aerospace engineer just curious about the thing fed its measurements into an AI-powered aerodynamic simulator. The software was actually built for designing drones, not analyzing ancient relics. But when they ran the Saqqara bird's data through it, the results were, well, pretty stunning. The AI found that the model's proportions matched up closely with modern glider designs. The lift-to-weight ratio, the wing angle, even the tail structure. When you account for a missing stabilizer, everything pointed to a working glider. Not just a carved toy, a prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough that scaled three-dimensional prints made from the AI-optimized model could actually fly in wind tunnel tests. Now, that doesn't mean ancient Egyptians had gliders, but it does mean that someone understood a lot about airflow and lift, maybe from watching birds, maybe from experimenting with clay models. And here's where it gets even more interesting. AI was also used to scan other artifacts in museum storage rooms all over Cairo. One of them, never cataloged as anything special, turned out to have nearly identical geometry, a second Saqqara bird, hidden in plain sight for over 100 years. So no, this isn't proof of ancient aircraft, but it is proof that ancient people may have built objects that encoded natural principles, things we've long dismissed as just decorative. And thanks to AI, we're finally seeing those principles for what they are. Makes you wonder, right? What else is just sitting on a museum shelf waiting for someone to take a second look? The Tartaria tablets, unearthed in Romania in the 1960s, have been one of archaeology's quiet enigmas. Dated to around 5300 BC, they're these small clay pieces inscribed with symbols that honestly don't match anything from that time. No one could read them. Some folks thought they were hoaxes. Others figured they were just decorative patterns. But an AI model trained on thousands of linguistic systems told a different story. Using a blend of symbol recognition, sequence analysis, and cultural comparison, the AI started finding order in all that chaos. It noticed consistent spacing between symbols, recurring motifs, and even strange echoes of Proto-Sumerian glyphs, despite the fact that these tablets predate Sumer by centuries. The most compelling pattern? The AI found that the symbol sequences followed a data structure that's, well, remarkably similar to record-keeping systems quantity, object, transaction. A pattern seen in early Mesopotamian tablets used for trade. But the Tartaria tablets are older, much older. This raised an enormous question. Were these tablets the earliest example of a written system? Not for storytelling or law, just numbers. Accounting. A system to track goods, maybe livestock or harvests. A raw, practical kind of writing, long before writing was even thought to exist. The AI also found links between these symbols and the Avincha culture that spread across the Balkans during the same period. It suggested a shared symbolic language, a kind of protocode used for trade, governance, or even astronomy. And it proposed that this wasn't just a local anomaly. It might actually be the remnant of a far older and more widespread system that vanished before history even began. For decades, the Tartaria tablets sat as fringe evidence. But now, with AI decoding what the human eye missed, they're being reconsidered as a cornerstone in the origin story of civilization itself. Not mythical, not imagined. Just quietly real, etched in clay, and finally being read. High up in the Bayan Har Mountains of China, a series of strange stone discs were allegedly discovered back in the 1930s, hidden inside caves unknown to most of the world. These discs, now called the Drapa stones, are each about a foot wide and have a precise hole in the center, almost like a vinyl record if you can picture that. What made them especially unusual were the fine spiral grooves etched into their surfaces. Early reports claimed that these grooves weren't just decorative. They were actually microscopic text. For decades, this claim was met with a lot of skepticism. There were no translations, no cultural context. And honestly, the stones themselves had mostly disappeared from public view. But recently, high-definition scans of a few surviving discs, stored quietly in lesser-known collections, were uploaded into a powerful AI language model by a cross-continental research group. The AI was trained not just on known languages, but on pattern recognition across ancient mathematical symbology, pre-linguistic symbols, and even rhythmic encoding techniques found in music. What it uncovered sent shockwaves through the team. The spiral markings weren't random. They followed a complex fractal pattern, one the AI associated with time cycles and astronomical phenomena. But it got even stranger when the AI translated certain repeated sequences as descriptors for skyboats and metal that floats above storms. These terms weren't definitive proof of anything extraterrestrial, but they were consistent. Too consistent. And they lined up with oral legends from local tribes about beings that came down from the clouds and couldn't return. Some of the decoded phrases even hinted at catastrophe, crashes, sickness, and burial in mountain caves. Of course, there's still debate over whether the Droppa stones are real or just part of a legend that's grown over time. But the fact remains the AI decoded a pattern that traditional linguists had never cracked. Whether it's ancient truth or a lost myth recorded in stone, the story is there, and the AI may have just begun to read it. The Harappan civilization, or Indus Valley Civilization, flourished over 4,000 years ago in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Its cities were sophisticated, its plumbing advanced, and its trade routes vast. But one thing has always remained out of reach: its language. Thousands of small seals, tablets, and ceramic shards covered in mysterious symbols have been found. They look like writing, compact, consistent, repeated. But every attempt to decode them has failed. No Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscriptions. For centuries, it's been one of archaeology's greatest dead ends. Recently, researchers at Stanford developed a custom AI model to tackle this script, not by guessing meanings, but by identifying structure. The machine was taught how human languages evolve from simple marking systems into full writing. It was fed images of every known Harappan inscription, then asked to compare them with thousands of known scripts. The results were stunning. The AI detected a structure similar to early Sumerian accounting tablets' repetition of symbols near images of grain, animals, or containers. This suggested that Harappan script wasn't phonetic at all. It was partly logographic and partly numeric, like early Chinese, but even more abstract. But the AI found more than just trade symbols. On a rare broken seal, it isolated a recurring symbol cluster and compared it to other regional languages. It corresponded closely to the concept of water and flow. That might not sound like much, but in the Harappan world, water was power. Rivers determined trade, crop cycles, and life itself. With these new insights, scholars now believe the Harappan script may finally be on the path to full decipherment. Not because we got lucky, but because we trained a machine to think like language evolves, not just how it looks. The AI didn't read the script in the way we read a book. It saw the system behind it, the rules, the logic, the pattern, and in doing so, it cracked the code just enough to turn guesswork into science. For centuries, the Nazca lines, massive geoglyphs etched into the desert of southern Peru, have fascinated and confused researchers. From high above, you can see massive shapes of animals, people, and geometric forms spanning hundreds of feet. But from the ground, they vanish. Their creators left no records, and their purpose has remained one of history's greatest puzzles. Now, thanks to AI-powered aerial mapping, we may be closer than ever to understanding why these shapes were made. Using data from drones, satellites, and ground-penetrating radar, a team of researchers built a detailed three-dimensional model of the entire Nazca Plateau. Into that model, they fed an AI designed to detect not just the shapes, but their orientation, frequency, and environmental relationships. The AI found something remarkable. The lines weren't random decorations or mere art. Many of them correspond with subterranean water sources. In fact, the largest ones seem to map out ancient aquifer systems. Where the lines intersect or spiral, there are often old wells or signs of irrigation tunnels buried beneath. But that wasn't all. The animal shapes, like the hummingbird, spider, and monkey, weren't just symbols. The AI linked their positions with constellations visible during key agricultural seasons. This suggests the Nazca may have used the lines as a kind of dual-purpose system, both a map of their land and a celestial calendar, guiding planting and harvests. Some of the spiral shapes even follow Fibonacci-like curves, natural growth patterns that can help estimate seasonal changes. These weren't just massive doodles in the sand, they were science, scaled up to be visible to the sky. So why make them so huge? That's the last mystery. Some believe they were meant for the gods to see. Others think hot air balloons may have existed in some form. But what's clear now, thanks to AI, is that the Nazca lines weren't aimless. They were messages carved into Earth, perfectly aligned with the sky and the needs of life below. The Phaistos disk, discovered over a century ago on the Greek island of Crete, has remained one of archaeology's most cryptic artifacts. A round clay disc just 6 inches across, it's covered in a spiraling sequence of stamped symbols. 241 total impressions made using 45 distinct pictographic signs. No other artifact like it has ever been found. Its meaning, still unsolved, until now. Using a new neural decoding system designed to handle extremely small and unique datasets, a research team at a digital heritage lab ran every high-resolution image of the disk ever recorded through the AI. The model was taught not to translate like a language app, but to think like a historian to look for recurring sequences, symbol frequency, and contextual overlap with known scripts from neighboring cultures. The breakthrough came when the AI noticed that certain symbol clusters, like a flower followed by an arching staff, appeared regularly at the start and end of sections. It proposed that these were not words but markers, chapter titles, the beginning and end of a repeated liturgical or calendar phrase. Even more intriguing, when these sections were aligned with ancient Minoan agricultural cycles, the symbols suddenly made sense. One portion seemed to correspond to grain harvest, another to lunar positioning. The AI suggested the disk may be a rotating calendar, a ritual agricultural tool, similar in function to the Antikythera mechanism, though far simpler. One of the most surprising predictions from the AI was that the disk used a form of verbal rhythm. Based on the spacing and repetition of key symbols, the disk may have been meant to be read aloud, chanted even, not just read, but performed. That theory gained traction when a musicologist ran the pattern through vocalization software. The cadence and breaks resembled ancient Cretan hymns, as preserved in oral traditions. It's possible the disk wasn't just a calendar, but a song, a spiral hymn encoded in clay and preserved across millennia. We may never get a perfect translation, but now, thanks to AI, the Phaistos disk is no longer just a pretty puzzle. It's a message with form, function, and structure, possibly the world's oldest printed text, stamped by hand and preserved through fire, silence, and finally, machine learning. They called them crazy until the proof surfaced. These conspiracy theories turned out to be 100% real. At first, it sounded like a Hollywood plot. Secret labs, shadowy figures, and experiments designed to bend the human mind. But this wasn't a scene from a Jason Bourne movie. It was real. For years, the CIA ran a covert program called MKUltra, aimed at controlling behavior using chemicals, psychological tactics, and methods that veered deep into sci-fi territory. The project began in the early 1950s during the height of Cold War paranoia. The US feared that foreign enemies had developed mind control techniques, and they wanted their own. The CIA poured millions into hidden research, setting up front companies and using institutions like hospitals and universities without anyone knowing what was actually going on. Subjects were often unaware they were being experimented on. Some were fed powerful hallucinogens. Others were exposed to extreme isolation, hypnosis, or sensory overload. It wasn't just volunteers either. Many never even consented. In some cases, illegal substances were slipped into drinks to observe the effects. The agency was chasing the ultimate weapon, the ability to manipulate thoughts, break down personalities, and extract secrets without torture. It went far beyond the lab. CIA operatives tested these techniques on real people in cities like San Francisco and New York, using unsuspecting citizens as guinea pigs. There were safe houses rigged with one-way mirrors, surveillance gear, secret recordings. At one point, they even tried to erase a person's memory to rebuild it from scratch, basically turning humans into blank slates. For years, people who claimed they were part of this sounded like conspiracy theorists. The government denied everything. That changed when documents were accidentally uncovered in the 1970s, leading to Senate hearings. What they revealed shocked even hardened investigators. The CIA had indeed been conducting psychological experiments on citizens without oversight, with goals that veered into the bizarre. MK Ultra officially ended in the early 1970s, but by then, most of the files had been destroyed on purpose. Only fragments survived, which is why the full scope of what really happened remains unclear. Still, enough details have surfaced to confirm the program's existence and its shocking reach. For 40 years, hundreds of men in Macon County, Alabama, were told they were receiving free health care from the government. They signed up for what was described as a study on bad blood. What they didn't know was that they were being watched, not treated. The Tuskegee syphilis study began in 1932, run by the U.S. Public Health Service. Its goal? To observe how untreated syphilis progressed over time. The men, sharecroppers, many of them poor, and with little access to real medical care, were given placebos even after penicillin became the accepted cure in the 1940s. Researchers deliberately kept them in the dark, just to see what would happen if the disease was left alone. Doctors took blood samples, conducted physical exams, and told the men they were being helped, but none of them received actual treatment. Even when symptoms worsened, the study continued. The researchers wanted data, not cures. For decades, this was brushed off as rumor, something too dark to be real. But in 1972, a whistleblower inside the program leaked the truth. The media exploded. Congressional hearings followed. By then, many participants had passed and countless families were left with unanswered questions. It wasn't just a breach of ethics, it became one of the clearest examples of institutional betrayal in modern U.S. history. The fallout led to the creation of stricter rules for human testing and informed consent. But the scars didn't fade easily. Even today, distrust in medical institutions within some communities can be traced back to Tuskegee. This wasn't a theory, it happened. The study's records are archived, the apologies were public. It's a chapter that doesn't need exaggeration. The facts alone are chilling enough. Deep in the redwood forests of Northern California sits a private campground where every July, some of the world's most powerful men gather behind locked gates. Politicians, CEOs, artists, and former presidents have all been spotted there. The place is called Bohemian Grove, and for years it was whispered about like something out of a secret society novel. The rumors always sounded too wild to be true. Strange rituals, hooded figures, a giant stone owl, until someone finally snuck in and captured it all on film. In the early 2000s, video footage surfaced showing members dressed in robes participating in a bizarre ceremony called the Cremation of Care. It looked like a scene from Eyes Wide Shut, but this wasn't fiction. The Bohemian Club, which owns the Grove, claims it's just performance art, a way for stressed-out elites to unwind. They say there's no politics, no deals, no plotting. But over the years, major policy decisions have reportedly been discussed there. Former U.S. presidents have given speeches under the redwoods. Corporate heads rub elbows with lawmakers in total privacy. No press, no recordings. What happens in the Grove stays in the Grove. Even Richard Nixon, in a taped conversation, called it the most faggy goddamn thing you could ever imagine, and he had attended. That's how surreal it was, even to insiders. No official wrongdoing has ever been proven, but when you have former defense secretaries and global bankers gathering in secret while chanting around bonfires, people are bound to ask questions. Bohemian Grove is a real place with real guests, and no amount of denial has erased the lingering feeling that something more happens under those trees. There was a time when government officials swore that organized crime didn't exist in America. The idea of a secret, nationwide syndicate of mobsters running rackets, fixing elections, and controlling unions was written off as fiction, something for pulp novels and black and white gangster films. That changed on a cold day in 1957. A meeting of over 100 top mafia figures from across the country was held at a secluded home in Appalachian, New York. The gathering was supposed to be discreet, a rare sit-down to discuss turf wars, profits, and who would call the shots going forward. But local law enforcement got suspicious about all the out-of-state luxury cars rolling into the tiny town. The police raided the house, and the mobsters scattered into the woods in tailored suits and leather shoes. The arrests made national headlines. Suddenly, the denials didn't hold. The FBI could no longer ignore what had just been caught red-handed. That moment confirmed that the mafia wasn't just a movie trope. It was very real, very organized, and very powerful. From there, investigations intensified. Wiretaps, sting operations, and RICO cases followed. Names like Gambino, Genovese, and Colombo weren't just screen villains. They were real people running real empires. And those empires reached deep into politics, construction, casinos, and more. The Appalachian meeting became a turning point. It forced law enforcement and the public to accept what many already suspected: the mafia wasn't a myth. It had been hiding in plain sight, protected by silence, loyalty, and a code that punished betrayal with deadly consequences. Even today, organized crime still exists in different forms. But the legacy of denial around the mafia remains one of the clearest examples of how a conspiracy theory can turn into an undeniable fact, once the right spotlight shines on it. For decades, cigarette ads featured doctors, movie stars, even cartoon mascots. The message was everywhere smoking was normal, even healthy. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, tobacco companies knew the truth and kept it hidden. Internal documents eventually revealed that these companies had known since at least the 1960s that nicotine was addictive. Not just a habit, chemically addictive, and they also knew their products caused severe health issues. But instead of coming clean, they hired scientists to muddy the waters, crafted ad campaigns to make smoking look glamorous, and even targeted young audiences to create lifelong customers. Executives from major companies testified before Congress in the 1990s. One after another, they stated under oath that they didn't believe nicotine was addictive. It was one of the most surreal moments in televised history. The footage is still available, and it feels like something out of a satirical movie. Then came the leaks. Whistleblowers from inside the industry began to speak up. One of the most famous, a former executive named Jeffrey Wigand, revealed that cigarette formulas were being chemically adjusted to enhance the addictive effect. The truth spilled out like smoke from a fire that had been burning for years. Eventually, Big Tobacco was forced to pay out billions in settlements. They also had to stop using certain marketing tactics, especially ones aimed at minors. But the damage had already been done. The idea that such powerful corporations could hide the facts in plain sight for so long felt impossible. Yet it happened. It's no longer a theory, it's history. And it remains one of the most clear-cut examples of how calculated deception can shape public perception for generations. In the middle of the New Mexico desert, a city suddenly appeared. It wasn't on maps. The people who lived there used fake names. Their mail was censored and their movements tightly monitored. That city was Los Alamos, and it was built for one purpose: to develop the most powerful weapon the world had ever seen. The Manhattan Project wasn't just a top-secret government mission. It was an entire shadow world. More than 130,000 people worked on it, spread across multiple locations including Tennessee, Washington, and New Mexico. Most of them had no idea what they were helping build. Engineers thought they were working on energy systems. Chemists believed it was scientific research. Only a small handful knew they were racing to split the atom before Nazi Germany did. Entire families moved to hidden towns surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. Grocery stores, schools, even churches were constructed, just without any outsiders allowed. People couldn't talk about their jobs. Neighbors didn't ask questions. If they did, they disappeared from the project. The project culminated in the Trinity test, the world's first nuclear explosion. It lit up the desert sky and changed the course of history. But what's just as staggering is that something of this scale remained completely secret from the public until after the bombs were dropped on Japan. After the war, stories began to emerge. People were stunned to learn that their government had created entire cities that no one outside had ever heard of. The security, the code names, the compartmentalization, it all sounded like science fiction. Yet it was real. The Manhattan Project proved that not only could a massive conspiracy exist, it could succeed for years under tight control. All in plain sight, but out of reach. Once a year in luxurious hotels across Europe or North America, some of the most powerful people on the planet meet behind closed doors. No press, no public statements, no recordings. The event is known as the Bilderberg meeting, and for years it was whispered about like a globalist myth, a cabal plotting world affairs over cocktails and filet mignon. But it's real. The Bilderberg Group was founded in 1954 to foster dialogue between Europe and North America. Its guest lists have included prime ministers, tech moguls, banking giants, and royalty. Attendees are allowed to speak freely, supposedly to encourage open conversation. But the veil of secrecy has always raised questions. For decades, any mention of the Bilderberg Group in mainstream media was dismissed. Then the guest list started leaking. Reporters began camping outside. Photos surfaced of familiar faces slipping into black SUVs. Even top executives from tech giants and defense contractors were seen walking into these meetings. What's discussed there? That's the part no one knows for sure. No minutes are recorded. No official declarations come out. The group claims it's all informal discussions. But when some of the same people seen at these gatherings later push global policy shifts in their home countries, people take notice. The Bilderberg Group is no longer a fringe rumor. Its existence is documented. Its influence, while hard to measure directly, is no longer deniable. Whether it's just a high-end networking retreat or something deeper, one thing is clear: when that many powerful people gather in total secrecy, it's not just dinner and small talk. Until a few years ago, if someone said the government was watching your phone, reading your emails, or tracking your movements, they were called paranoid. Then Edward Snowden walked out with proof. In one of the most explosive intelligence leaks in modern history, Snowden, a former contractor for the NSA, revealed that mass surveillance wasn't a conspiracy. It was already happening, and it was bigger than anyone had guessed. Programs like PRISM, X-Keyscore, and Tempora weren't targeting just known threats. They were hoovering up data from ordinary people, emails, chats, call logs, even your browsing history. All collected in bulk, often without warrants, and shared between intelligence agencies in secret deals. Snowden's revelations showed that major tech companies, some willingly, some under pressure, had been funneling user data to the government. Even encrypted services were being penetrated. The global reaction was immediate. Protests erupted. Foreign governments demanded answers. Some allies were furious to learn they too had been spied on. The United States government initially labeled Snowden a traitor, but the documents he released sparked international debates about privacy, freedom, and the limits of surveillance in a digital age. Some of the programs were eventually scaled back or brought under greater scrutiny. Still, many of them remain in operation. The idea that your private messages or cloud-stored photos might be scanned by machines in secret facilities once sounded like sci-fi. Now it's just part of daily reality. Snowden's leaks didn't expose a plan, they exposed a system already running. And once that door was opened, the illusion of digital privacy collapsed for good. In the quiet city of Kofu, Japan, something strange happened in 1975 that has never been fully explained. Two elementary school boys were playing near a vineyard at sunset when they saw a bright orange object in the sky. It wasn't a plane or a balloon, it was a silent, glowing craft descending toward the ground. As it landed, the boys watched in awe. What they saw next would be etched in their memories forever. They claimed a hatch opened and out stepped a figure nearly 7 feet tall with metallic skin and long arms. Its face, they said, was wrinkled, and it moved in slow, deliberate steps. According to their account, it touched one of the boys on the shoulder, emitting a strange, paralyzing sensation. A second being was visible inside the craft, operating controls. Moments later, the ship lifted off and vanished into the sky. At first, the story sounded like something lifted from a manga, but local police and school officials didn't dismiss it outright. In fact, they conducted interviews and even visited the site. Ground traces were reportedly found, and the story made headlines across Japan. Unlike most UFO encounters, this one was met with surprising seriousness. The boys' testimony never changed. Over the years, UFO researchers have called it one of the most credible sightings involving children, especially because it included physical evidence and prompt investigation by authorities. Though no government has officially confirmed what the boys saw, the Kofu incident has remained a mystery. Was it a misidentified military craft? A hoax? Or something truly unearthly? Whatever it was, it became one of Japan's most compelling and well-documented UFO encounters, one that still leaves people wondering whether something out of this world briefly touched down in a vineyard. In 1964, the US government told the world that North Vietnamese patrol boats had attacked American naval ships in the Gulf of Tonkin. This act of aggression was used as justification for escalating the Vietnam War. Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution shortly after, giving the president broad military powers. The country rallied around the cause. There was just one problem: the second attack never happened. Declassified documents later revealed that on August 4th, there had been confusion. Radar signals were misinterpreted. Nervous operators thought they saw enemy boats when they didn't. No physical damage occurred, and no confirmed contact was ever made. But the event was reported as fact to the public and used to ignite one of the most devastating wars in U.S. history. Lyndon Johnson is said to have privately told aides that those dumb, stupid sailors were just shooting at flying fish. But in front of the nation, the story was clear and firm: the U.S. had been attacked. Years later, after piles of classified material became public, the official story unraveled. The Gulf of Tonkin incident became a textbook case of how misinformation, whether intentional or not, can steer global conflict. Millions of people would be affected by a battle that was, in part, sparked by a phantom threat. It's now widely accepted by historians that the event was misrepresented to gain public and congressional support for war. What began as a blurry radar blip turned into a global firestorm, and a conspiracy theory that turned out to be entirely grounded in truth. It's hard to believe that a government would ever plan to harm its own people just to justify war. But in the early 1960s, US military leaders actually drafted such a plan. It was called Operation Northwoods, and honestly, it wasn't the work of fringe operatives. It came from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The plan proposed staging fake terror attacks on American soil to create outrage and gain public support for an invasion of Cuba. The ideas included blowing up a US ship, hijacking planes, and even faking the deaths of civilians. These events would be blamed on Fidel Castro's regime, making a military response appear justified. The proposal made its way to Defense Secretary Robert McNamara and then President John F. Kennedy. To their credit, they rejected it. The plan was shelved, but it wasn't forgotten. For years, rumors of this bizarre document floated around in conspiracy circles, until it was declassified in the 1990s, and everything checked out. Operation Northwoods is one of the most stunning examples of a real plan that reads like a political thriller. It shows just how far some in power were willing to go to manipulate public opinion and launch a war. No part of it was carried out, but the fact that it made it as far as the president's desk reveals the scale of strategic deception that was being considered. It also redefined what was possible behind closed doors, and what conspiracies might not be fiction after all. In the 1980s, Americans were told one thing: the US does not negotiate with hostile forces. Yet, behind the scenes, a shadow operation was unfolding that connected arms dealers, foreign rebels, and government officials in a web so tangled even Hollywood would have trouble keeping up. The Iran-Contra affair was built on two secret goals-free US hostages held in the Middle East, and fund Contra rebels fighting the leftist government in Nicaragua. Congress had already banned support for the Contras, so money couldn't come from official channels. The workaround? Sell weapons to Iran, despite an arms embargo, and funnel the proceeds to the rebels. It was all done in secret. When it was exposed in 1986, the nation was stunned. Top officials, including members of the National Security Council, were involved. Testimonies were broadcast live, and the phrase plausible deniability became a household term. Colonel Oliver North emerged as the public face of the scandal. Charismatic and defiant, he testified before Congress, claiming he had acted out of patriotism. Some praised him, others saw him as proof of how deep the deception ran. Several people were convicted, but most had their sentences overturned or were later pardoned. The scandal revealed the scale of unauthorized operations and how secret agendas could bypass the very laws meant to limit power. The Iran-Contra affair wasn't a theory, it was televised history. The hearings, the confessions, and the cover-ups played out in real time, showing that sometimes the truth hides in plain sight, until someone decides to speak. It sounds like something from a dystopian novel, government agents secretly collecting human remains to study the effects of nuclear fallout. But this wasn't fiction. It was Project Sunshine, a real Cold War-era program conducted by the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and allied governments. After the first nuclear detonations, scientists were desperate to understand how radioactive materials, especially strontium-90, spread through the environment and the human body. Strontium-90 mimics calcium, making its way into bones and teeth, and researchers feared it was accumulating silently in the population. So they started gathering samples, not from volunteers, but from the recently deceased. For years, whispers of this operation were dismissed as macabre rumors. Then in the mid-1990s, declassified documents and international investigations confirmed it all. The British government even admitted that parts of the program had been carried out through cooperation with US agencies. The entire effort was cloaked in secrecy, justified in the name of national security. One quote from a US official at the time, uncovered in a now public document, stood out. "We have to get human samples, and I mean human samples. We have to do it in a way that won't upset the relatives." Project Sunshine is one of those real-world conspiracies that shocks even seasoned researchers. Not because it was hidden, but because of how it crossed ethical boundaries without blinking. No fantasy, no exaggeration, just a classified program that treated people like data points in the race to understand the nuclear age. And for decades, no one even knew it was happening. That's about it. Write in the comments which unconfirmed conspiracy theory is true in your opinion. For more useful information, watch other videos.